Hey everyone, it's Tim again. I want to give you a little bit of information on what I'm doing here on Jerry Dean's Mustang. I'm starting to put the rear end in it and everything else, rear end, ladder bars, and the middle cross member. That's where I start. So I wanted to show you a little bit more video on this stuff, and hopefully this helps you a little bit. So here we go. That's where we're at on Jerry's car. Rear end housing was put together. I think I showed that in one of the other videos, and the ladder bars, they're built. And what I do with this, and I hope you can see it, but you can see my lasers turned on, and it's coming through the middle of the car, hitting some of the spots. My jig is set up so that it's got parallel lines on each side. I don't know, see if you can see them. I'll try to show them to you. Like right there, I've got a parallel scribe line on both sides, and I've got one up in the front, and then that gray cross member, one in the middle. That these squares are on right now. I've got two squares there that are on those lines, so I could measure to make sure that the cross member is in the right spot in the car. Then I've got one on the back cross member, but you can't see. So what I do when I start is I prop the rear end up at the right height, and then I get it square to the world in the car. So it's, you know, from measuring from the housing end to housing end, it lines up with this center line in the car. It's the same on each side. So I know that when the car's done, the rear end housing is going to be straight in the car. That's the key. I've mentioned that before in videos, but if the rear end housing is not straight, the car's not going to go straight. You get the housing straight and it'll solve a lot of problems down the road. I've developed some different ladder bar brackets, made that the holes more parallel, and made one extra hole in the bottom to give me a little bit more adjustment and get the bar down a little bit lower. Like I say, my bars are 42 inches long, so I like running the longer bar, take some of the hit out of the car, especially with these guys that are running real high horsepower motors. Though a little bit longer bar helps. If you're building like an H-gas car or something, you can run a 36-inch bar and be really good there. So what I do here, and I'll show you this stuff too, the bottom of the rocker is 12 inches off the ground. So I've built these fixtures here. They clamp in, one on each side. And then I built this fixture back here that clamps in the middle between the ladder bars, and then these two little pieces that clamp in between them, and that's all 12 inches off the top of the jig. And that helps me locate this cross member. You know, it just, I don't have to wrestle with it so much. I can basically just set it in there, and then what I do is I've put the ladder bar brackets against the housing and the bolt in here, and that clamp on there, and I just adjust it around until I know it's even on both sides and level. So I think I've got, you can probably see my little torpedo level on that side. I just use that as a reference. So when I start, maybe you can see this stuff here, but I start laying out where my rear frame rails are going to go, and my ladder bar bracket where that's got to go, and I tack weld them on this cross member before I even put it in the car. So that's holding the front end of the ladder bar up. And then I make the same parallel, or the same measurement on the housing to keep the ladder bars parallel with each other, and like just use a big C-clamp to hold them back there. Get everything in place, and then I'll rotate the housing where I want it, so I can get like 2 degrees of downward pinion angle on it, and then she's ready to go. So hopefully you can see my laser blinking on and off. The center of the housing, what I do, like I say, I know it's level, I know the height's right. I've got that little plate on there with a center line cut in it, and I line that up with the jig, the laser with the jig first, and then I slide the rear end side to side to get it equal on both sides, centered in the car from side to side, I guess is what I want to say. Then what I do to make sure that I know it's parallel, like I say, I measure off these squares from the square to the housing off this line, to say I'll measure from here to the housing on both sides to make sure I'm parallel that way. And then what I do is I have a little socket-headed cap screw down there. I think you can see it. Get this out of the way. That's so I can hook my tape measure on there and triangulate the measurement. That way I know I'm measuring it 3 different ways and the housing's super square. So like I say, I'll hook on that with my tape measure because it's right on the center line, and then I just measure to the end of the housing on the edge, and then if I need to move it one way or another, I just tap it all around. And I only ever tack any of this stuff. Don't go solid welding nothing yet. So she's just tacked together temporarily to hold everything in place and make sure I'm happy with what's going on. And like I say, when I take it apart, I can weld it up solid. I'll take the rear end out of the car completely and weld it up on the bench. So, but this is how I get the rear end in the car. I'm hoping this is enough information for you. As I had mentioned before, I try to go from the bottom of the tire, or would be the bottom of the jig, to that bolt there, line that up with the front bumper or the bottom of the front bumper, whatever you want to do. That's where I want the center of that bolt to be, is on that line. So I don't have that in the car, you can't see that here, but you can see some of that stuff in my other videos. So I don't know if this is any more information for you or not. One of the things I learned a long time ago when I started scaling and squaring cars, my pre-gasser days, is with a car like this, a ladder bar car per se, not necessarily a 4-link car, but it does work with that well. If you are struggling to make the car work, put the bottom bar level, okay? You put this bar level with the ground, and then you set your shocks mid-adjustment and make a pass. If the car hits the tires too hard, you tighten up the shocks and extension, and if the car picks up an ET, that means it wants less hit. If the car wants a looser shock, it needs more hit, and that in turn tells you where to move the bar. If you want less hit, you move it down, and if you want more hit, you move it up. So use your shocks to determine that with the bottom bar level. So pretty simple. I learned that a long time ago, and it's worked. And I've done that with 4-link cars too that other people have built. I just set the bottom bar level and figure out what the car likes and just move it from there. So anywho, my next step's going to be putting a rear cross member in this car in the rear frame rail. So I'll try to share some of that with you when I get that done. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.